Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and you're joining us for another market recap. I am joined today by my co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Bruce.
Hi, Anna. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, into June now already.
Well, I don't know about you in Kelowna, but in Vancouver, we had record-breaking heat. It was 28 degrees. It's now cloudy again and cold, but we got to see a taste of summer.
Yeah, it was nice here too. I think we were up pushing 35, so.
Pretty exciting stuff. Okay, there's some bigger stuff that we're going to talk about this week, bigger moves that are happening within the economy. We're going to talk about some strong economic numbers. We're going to touch on increase in implied volatility. You're hopefully going to tell us what that means. We're going to talk about the WTI crude. It hits a 2-year high, and some of the things that might come from that or that are associated with that. We're going to explain to you what Dutch disease means, and are we going to see that in Canada? We'll talk about a new listing coming to the CSC, and we're going to end off with meme stocks and talk about AMC. What happened? They had a bit of a surprising filing this week with the SEC, so we will talk about that. So let's start. What happened this week with some strong economic numbers?
Yeah, we've seen continually strong numbers across the board. In this case, we saw the PMI services index, the ISM services index released, and we saw a new high for that. I mean, this data goes back into the 90s, and we've never seen the level this high before. It was close to this if you go back a couple of months ago, and that was a high, and now we've seen that level beaten again. So, which is fantastic to see. Obviously, in the U.S., the services side of things is significantly bigger than manufacturing now. There's a lot of manufacturing that's done, kind of offshore now. So that's obviously bodes really well for the U.S., their economy, and then obviously them being our biggest neighbors to the south, trade partner. That's great for the Canadian market as well.
That's great. Okay, we also saw an increase in implied volatility. What does that mean?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is we haven't really seen a lot of this creeping into the market yet. In reality, it's been pretty muted. But what we're seeing is that one of the tools we use is called a relative rotation graph, and it helps us to determine kind of where things are headed. We kind of refer to it in our shop here as our crystal ball. And because quite often the direction that these RRGs move really is anticipating where things are going. And so what we've seen is a pickup in some of the volatility metrics. So if you see on the graph here, this is looking at various indices and their volatility. So the VIX equivalent for the Dow Jones, the S&P, the Russell, and the NASDAQ. And what we're seeing is that this is actually going from the lagging quadrant to the improving quadrant, which means that that's increasing in volatility. So what it's telling us is that we could be in for a period of increased volatility in the future. We always talk about with our clients and with prospective investors that anytime the VIX index is kind of below that 20, really anyone can make money. It's fairly simple to make money. When it gets into sort of that 20 to 30 range, that's where it really kind of separates the people who have fairly good knowledge and skill and experience from those who don't, because it tends to chop around. Right now it's below that. And then we always talk about above 30 is really, that's no man's land. Like really nobody makes money there. Maybe if you were short and you were good at being short, so tactical short, put your short on, get it off. But even then, a lot of the short sellers don't make money when the volatility is that high, especially if it gets that high and then comes back into that range. So we just want to be aware of where we are and where that might change as far as what we do with our portfolios, how we handle our portfolios, and what we do with our risk controls for our portfolios.
Right, of course, and you always have to have that in the back of mind as you guys look at your investments, as should others. Let's talk about WTI crude. It hits a 2-year high this week. WTI crude, for those that don't know, is the West Texas Intermediate crude oil. It is a type of oil. It is one of the 3 major benchmarks that kind of define the pricing of oil. What happened this week? What does that mean that it's reached a 2-year high? What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest news is the huge recovery. It was quite an anomaly a little over a year ago now when it traded negative, and that was because there was so much oil out there and not enough storage effectively. With the commerce of the world shutting down, that meant that airlines, transportation, trucking, cars, heavy industry, no one was using oil, and there was all this oil being produced, and there was really nowhere for it to be stored. So as those contracts rolled over, people were forced to dump those contracts, and they actually were forced to have people pay to take those contracts from them, which is crazy to believe. So it meant oil was actually negative for a couple of days there. Now we're seeing oil back, and it's at a high we haven't seen since 2019. Obviously that is on the back of some of the economic growth that we've seen, some of the pickup in the economy. Obviously transportation is strong from a trucking perspective, from a rails perspective. And now, if you look at some of the numbers that have come out of the US, the airlines are starting to really pick up. And the anticipation is now that, that airline traffic is going to pick up. That's going to continue to use more energy. And so, obviously the price is hitting a high. That's in Canada, that's fantastic because, we still have a huge energy sector, ESG or not, we do. And, that drives a lot of Alberta's economy and has a huge impact on the Canadian banks and on really the rest of Canada. So, it's fantastic from that perspective that we've seen this move in oil. We've seen the energy index. It's the best producing or best performing index of all the indexes in Canada this year, and obviously helped the TSE hit a new record high this week.
So WTI, it really is very descriptive of what's going on with oil prices in North America. There's two other benchmarks globally. Do they tend to work in tandem, or are they completely based on what's happening within their jurisdictions?
No, for the most part, they're going to work amongst with each other. So they're going to move in relation to one another, depending on, of course, the biggest factor is transportation. Because in a perfect world, if you could just instantaneously move, Brent crude over to West Texas or back and forth to those refineries, there would be no difference. But the difference obviously comes into play when you have to transport that, and in that case, it's from Europe to North America. The barrier is transportation, putting it in a ship, finding that ship, getting it shipped across the ocean. So, that's obviously a part of the differential between those prices. If it was, if you could instantaneously move it from one place to the next, you'd have an arbitrage situation where if it was out of line in one market, somebody would buy it there and sell it in another, and it'd be, kind of immediately moved out.
Right. Now, listen, on the note of oil and oil prices going up and resources and energy and the Canadian dollar, I was reading up this week about this fear that potentially Canada will enter what's called the Dutch disease. So just to clarify what that is, it's an economic theory that as commodities and the dollar will go up, that rising currency could lead to a drop in exports and a loss in jobs in other jurisdictions. Am I describing it okay? It's a bit of a paradox, essentially, is what it is that things are going really well, but it does have kind of, a flip side of that coin. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how it works. And if you just sort of equate it to energy prices, it has that impact, right? And if you think about it just from a simple standpoint of just the consumer, even in Canada, as the price of oil goes up, it means it's more expensive for you to drive your car, and you use it. You have less money to spend on other discretionary things. Well, it's the same thing with other countries. If they're spending more on our energy, then they have less to spend on other commodities that we might sell them or other goods that we might sell them. So it can certainly have that impact. And if you think back to when, oil hit, what was it, 148 or 149 back in 2008, that was, a huge impact. It was great for the oil patch, but it certainly had an impact on some of the manufacturing industries in Ontario.
Absolutely. Do you think, is this something that you've thought about? Is this something that you think could happen?
At this point in time, I don't, it's not something that we think has a strong possibility, just because, there's still lots of oil that can be kind of turned on. And at these prices, don't be surprised if you start to see drilling really pick up. We haven't seen it pick up that much yet. But at this price now, it becomes cost effective for them to start drilling again, most of the E&P producers out there. And so, they'll make those decisions after they've seen a bit of stability with the price, so that they're, confident that it's found kind of a floor. At that point in time, they'll step up and start doing more drilling, which of course is more supply, which keeps the price fixed. So, in the oil patch, they always say higher prices lead to lower prices and lower prices lead to higher prices because, as, prices go higher, there's more drilling, and then it, causes a glut and vice versa.
Well, that's good. So we can still hopefully enjoy this for a little while because things are going well. Okay, I did want to mention a company has filed a prospectus with the commission to list with the CSE. I'm excited, and hopefully they come and join us soon. A Delta Cleantech. They announced that they have filed a direct listing on the CSE. They and they're doing it as part of what they're saying is carbon capture technology takes off. Now, I didn't know much about this, so of course I had to look it up. Carbon capture technology is used to essentially capture and store carbon dioxide before it is released into the atmosphere. It can potentially also create negative emissions, which is quite amazing. Is this something that you're seeing as you're looking at stuff within this sector? Are you seeing more of this type of technology come? I mean, you mentioned ESG earlier. I would imagine this is going to be more in favor in the markets.
Yeah, for sure it is. And we're seeing more of that all the time. These oil companies are being leaned on very hard from the environmental side. They're always trying to figure out how to reduce their carbon footprint, and obviously this type of technology. I haven't looked specifically into their technology, but there's other similar technologies out there that are certainly gaining interest from investors and also interest in sort of in the corporate world as well.
Well, and it definitely seems like the new investor wants to see more of this stuff. So we're hopeful and excited to have you guys join us. Can't wait. Okay, we're going to talk about AMC. First of all, I don't know about all of you, but I'm seeing everywhere the word meme stock. So I thought it was important to clarify what meme stock is. And essentially, it's any public company that is being moved or swayed via a group of retail investors or investors on social media. So that is the definition of a meme stock. So if you're seeing that on the headlines of everywhere, that's a meme stock. So AMC came out this week and they did a really interesting thing. So tell us what AMC did this week.
Well, if you remember last week, we talked specifically about AMC and the fact that they had this short squeeze that caused the price to go up. And at that point in time, we speculated and said, now would be a great time to raise some money. And they did. They did it twice this week, actually, and raised a little over $700 million. So that obviously gives them some cash to help with their business in such a difficult time, and it was quite interesting to see them do that.
Absolutely. So they had, so again, just to remind everyone, this was, this is from back in the days of GameStop. This was another attack or whatever you'd call it from Wall Street Bets on Reddit. They surged in the short squeeze. They surged over 3,000%. And so they came out and they said, we're going to issue the stock. But in their filing with the Securities Commission, another interesting thing came out. They announced that they plan to do this issuance of shares to capture, how well the company's doing. But they also warned investors, if it only plan on buying the stock if you are okay with losing all of your money. I mean, that's not a normal filing with the commission, is it?
No, it's not. And I mean, certainly that circulated around the street. I probably saw a dozen Bloomberg messages from different people citing that part of their disclosure.
Yeah. And, one thing I also have to mention that they did this week, which I thought was quite interesting. So the executives came out on Wednesday. So Thursday was the filing with the commission. But on Wednesday, they came out with this surge happening, obviously knowing that they were going to do this offering of shares. And they created a new portal for shareholders.
For free popcorn? Yeah.
For free popcorn. Yeah. So to connect with individual investors, and they'll offer free popcorn, exclusive screenings, and other perks. The last time I took my family to the theater, I would buy some of the stock just so I could get the free popcorn. It's so expensive. Yeah. And I thought this was interesting. I want to ask your opinion on this because let's break down kind of the role of a public company, its responsibility to the public, and its responsibility, the role and responsibility of the commissions. I think it's a fair thing that they came out and said, especially since they're issuing this stock, because it really could come back to haunt them, don't you think, if they're issuing stock at that price and they're saying this is not based on our fundamentals, we're capturing at this price, But just so you're all aware, this is not based on revenue that we're making from our business. Do you think that that was really a way to kind of cover themselves?
Oh yeah, clearly they were, because they were capitalizing on what happened, and they want to cover every base they can. I'm sure the lawyers were like, you got to cover yourself on this, especially when you're giving out free popcorn.
Yeah, right? Well, it's expensive popcorn,
Yeah.
Bruce. The other thing is, this is a good reminder to all that, if you're investing in speculative plays like this, you should always be prepared for that risk. You don't need the executives to do a filing with the commission if you're doing speculative moves like that. That's something that you should always consider, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So remember that, put that into your investment thesis. What should we think about going into next week?
Well, a couple of things that are coming up. One is in Canada here, we have an interest rate decision midweek, which is kind of interesting. And then a couple of things we're watching is we've got a couple new listings next week that are coming to market, or ones that have been in one case, one's been halted for a while. So Neuroscene and Salona Global are both coming out next week. So that's we're quite excited to watch both those.
Very cool. I also wanted to mention that later today, I will be back on the live train. I am joining Benzinga, and I'll be doing a live panel. We'll be talking about cannabis in the capital markets. There's a bunch of great companies that I'll be interviewing. So if you go to Benzinga, you can get all the information. You probably can still register. So join me later if you like. I'm sure the content will live past today if you don't get a chance to do it. And otherwise, Bruce, have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you.